I'd like to welcome everybody out to the Regional Growth Committee. This is Thursday, October 10th, 2024. The time is now 9:18. We're going to go ahead and do some introductions as we go around the table. I'm going to go ahead and we'll start over here. If you can just give us your name and affiliation, and then we'll get on to the individuals who are zoomed in. So please.
Rosie Hernandez, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Thank you.
Jordan Chandler, WFRC.
John A. Nardone, WFRC.
Brian Beck, Envision Utah.
I had to finish my donut bite. Brandon Stanger, Clinton City Mayor.
Andrea Pearson, WFRC.
Hi, I'm Andrew Gruber, Executive Director here at WFRC, and John A. just said her name, but I just want to take one moment and tell everybody, because John A., I think you were hired since the last Regional Growth Committee meeting. John A. is the new WFRC Communications Manager. And so she'll be helping communicate, share information with all of you and with our communities, and we're very happy to have her.
It's good to have you. Thank you. Bob Dandoy, Roy City.
Good morning. Ted Knowlton, Deputy Director here at WFRC. I'm also the Regional Growth Committee point of contact.
Good morning. Laureen Kamalu, a Davis County Commissioner, but here representing Utah Association of Counties, counties of the first and second class, I think, or all of them. I don't know. It's a day.
Reed Ewing, University of Utah City and Metropolitan Planning.
Beth Holbrook, Utah Transit Authority. Good morning.
Bryce Bird with the Utah Division of Air Quality.
Natalie Bone with the Salt Lake Chamber.
I'm Brad D., UDOT Transportation Commission.
Roger Borganicht, co-chair of Utahns for Better Transportation.
Jory Johnner, Long Range Plan Group here at WFRC.
Chad Wilkinson, Layton City, Community Development Director.
Meg Pageon, Community and Economic Development Director, WFRC.
And if anybody's wondering, I thought her name was something different. It was Meg Townsend until about a month ago, and now she's Meg Pageon. So if you get the point, congratulations, Meg.
Lauren Victor, WFRC staff.
Seamus Guetta, Long Range Planning Group, WFRC.
Bert Granberg with the Analytics Group at WFRC.
Okay. Let's go ahead and have the individuals online go ahead and introduce themselves. Okay. Jordan, let's see. I got to see it from a distance here.
Would you like me to?
Sharon, go ahead and Bolos, if you'll go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Sharon Bolos, Weaver County Commission.
Jeff?
Jeff Silvestrini, Mayor of Mill Creek, representing the Utah Air Quality Board.
Perfect. Weston?
Weston Apolloni, Planning Manager, Layton City.
Perfect. Nicole?
Nicole Bordeaux, UTA.
Excellent. Rex?
Rex Harris, Federal Highway Administration.
Thank you. Reed, one more time. Reed Ewing? We'll come back to you, Reed. Monica? Mayor?
Monica Zoltansky, Sandy Bayer.
Thank you. Julie?
Julie Bjornstead, Senior Transportation Planner at the Wasatch Regional Council.
Thank you. Lauren?
Morning, Lauren Palmer, Mayor out in Harriman.
Okay. Allison?
Allison Stroud, Sandy City Council.
Okay. Kevin? Kevin Van Essel? One more time, Kevin.
Kevin Van Tassel, UDOT.
Okay, thank you. And Tiffany?
Stephanie Pocock, UDOT.
Kate, thank you. Okay, I think we've got everybody.
I also see Mayor Phippen is online as well.
I didn't see him. Mayor?
He's over here. He's not yet. we'll let him in as soon as he accepts the invitation. And we also have several members of the public who are joining us online as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And welcome. We've got an action item we'd like to work through. This is the approval of the minutes from the Regional Growth Committee meeting that was held on August 15th, 2024. Any comments, questions, or issues with those minutes? Okay, hearing none then, do I have a motion then to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, all in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those minutes are approved. This is the public comment period. If you have some things you'd like to share with us, please give us your name and maybe the organization that you're affiliated with. We'll start with the individuals in this room, and then we'll move to the ones who may be online. Okay, name and organization. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Jensen. I'm here as a resident from Sandy. I'm here to ask the council to include the Rio Grande plan in their long-term transit plans for the Wasatch Front. This proposal provides many benefits to the entire Wasatch Front, and I don't think it's just limited to Salt Lake City. This proposal eliminates up to 8 street crossings in the city, and allows trains to move, especially Front Runner, to move faster through downtown. Tragically, the majority of pedestrian and train collisions happen in the city. And so this has ripple effects for Front Runner users from Ogden to Provo. This can cause hour delays. And so even if you're not passing through Salt Lake City, eliminating these crossings can really benefit everyone. Additionally, I think we need a much better passenger train station experience in Salt Lake City. Every day, thousands of people come to Salt Lake City for work or school or pleasure. And if they choose to take the train, the Rio Grande Depot is a much better station to welcome them. This would provide faster transit times and better amenities and sheltered. The Rio Grande Depot's a quarter-mile closer to the city than the current Salt Lake Central station, and that really doesn't sound like much, but when you look at the ridership, North Temple Station sees significantly better ridership, and the difference is it's closer downtown, it's closer to where people are trying to go. You can easily transfer to the airport line to, and also the buses. So all in all, it's just a better passenger experience, and I'd really like to see us implement that same thing with the Rio Grande Depot. I think we should bring that back to life, have this beautiful historic station there that is being renovated, and afterwards there's no plan for it. So it's waiting for something great to be done. And what gets me most excited is just the prospect of regional rail. I think it'd be really exciting to be able to take a train to St. George or Moab for the weekend. And additionally, right now, the Federal Railroad Administration has been studying long distance rail routes, like up to Portland, Seattle, Boise, Las Vegas, Los Angeles. The Rio Grande plan includes a dedicated Amtrak line, so we can accommodate these more trains that would be coming in the future. So I think if we were to implement this, we'd be ready for all this growth. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Got a couple who just walked in, Russ Fox from UTA and Carlton Christensen, okay, from UTA. So we appreciate you joining us. And then we have Helen Peters. She's representing Mayor Wilson, okay, from the county. And who else did we miss? Oh, there you are. Laura, okay, from the governor's office. Okay, anybody else inside the room here would like to have public comment? Okay, how about online? Andrea, could you kind of guide us, see if anybody's interested? I see, is that a Zach from Salt Lake City?
Yes.
Hand waved?
Yeah.
Please, go.
Is there anyone else? Or are you calling
No,
on
you're
me?
first. Go ahead.
Okay. It doesn't look like I'm able to share video, but can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah. So I want to talk about a larger movement in the demographics. I'm 31 years old. I represent the millennial generation, but even Gen Zs, we're starting to see a shift from a more car-oriented development pattern to multiple options. Like I have a car, I live downtown, but I also, since moving to Salt Lake City, have fallen in love with the tracks. I've taken the bus for the very first time, and I've been amazed at all the options and how that gives a much better lifestyle. So the Rio Grande plan and public transit in general should be seen as a bipartisan issue because effective transportation infrastructure benefits everyone, regardless of your political affiliation. And there's really this notion that, transit is like for one particular party, and I'm really here to break that. While conservatives have historically been perceived as opposing public transit, today there is no clear consensus on this stance. Many conservatives, including myself, recognize the value that transit brings in terms of economic development, reduced congestion, and improved quality of life for all citizens. Transportation connects communities, creates jobs, and supports businesses by making it easier for workers to have and customers to move efficiently. Investing in transit isn't about expanding government. It's about investing in the future and ensuring our cities remain competitive and livable. Conservative values like fiscal responsibility and economic efficiency can align with transit development, as high quality infrastructure ultimately leads to reduced transportation costs, less road maintenance, and greater returns on investment through increased property values and economic growth. I think that's really important to this topic of this meeting. And this is what I'll end it on is, while past political divisions have put transit on the opposite side of the aisle, it's clear that modern realities such as urbanization, environmental sustainability, and economic competitiveness make it an issue that transcends partisanship. The Rio Grande Plan is a prime opportunity for both sides to come together and champion solutions that serve the broader public good, creating lasting benefits for everyone. Thank you.
Zach, thank you. Okay, I appreciate your passion for this. Okay, I want to briefly recognize we got Mayor Pippin from Weber County with us as well. Andrea, is that next one?
I'm sorry, Anthony Tobler. We can hear you. Please provide your comment.
Yeah, I just also want to ask the council to support the Rio Grande plan as well. For the region to grow and reach its full potential, especially in the lead up to the Olympics, our transportation system needs a healthy heart. And the Rio Grande plan provides that heart with benefits that would circulate throughout the entire Wasatch Front. So some of those, as have been mentioned, would be FrontRunner would get to and pass through downtown more quickly and efficiently. We would have better connections to tracks and buses. We would have more central biking and walking options. And even just the economic benefits from all the newly available land, which I think would be 50 to 75 acres, ripe for development, would be the benefits of that just alone would be immense. So basically just I would ask everybody in the council to do their part to help us get an economic impact study done to help prove that. And if we're so willing to spend money on our freeways and highways with probably more limited benefits, then I would just ask that we're consistent, and I'd ask the council to add the Rio Grande plan to our regional plans for growth. Thanks.
Thank you, Anthony. Anybody else on the Zoom would like to make comment?
Anybody else? There's nobody else. Sorry? Okay. Nobody else? Mr. Chair, may I offer a brief comment in response to some of those comments?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to recognize Kevin Cromar from the Air Quality Board. Thank you for joining us, Kevin. So the Rio Grande plan is an idea that we have heard a lot about. There's a lot of energy in the community, particularly from the Salt Lake City, but others around the region have expressed interest in this. And There's been some preliminary study done on it through Salt Lake City. I just want everybody here to know on the Regional Growth Committee that there is a continuing analysis that is moving forward on the Rio Grande Plan. There's a joint study under the Reconnecting Communities program. Salt Lake City received a grant of close to $3 million to do a study conjunctively with Salt Lake City, UTA, UDOT, and WFRC to look not just at the Rio Grande Plan, but on east-west mobility in a much broader area, further north, further south, east and west, that encompasses the area of the Rio Grande Plan. And so you all have probably heard some about this, and I want to assure you that it is something that's being seriously evaluated in conjunction with, and very importantly, engaging with the local communities and the public in the area. So we at WFRC have met and are continuing to meet with representatives. And I say representatives from the Rio Grande Plan. It's really a group of motivated, engaged community residents who are dedicated to this idea. And we applaud them for doing that. And we're working collectively to evaluate this concept. And I will just say that I think it's fair to say that it's an exciting aspiration, and it would also be complex and expensive. So it is something that is being evaluated and balanced with a lot of other needs and priorities as we go forward. But we appreciate the community engagement.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, the clarification was absolutely necessary. Okay, thanks for your public input. Okay, it's always important that we get to see all sides of this issue, and it certainly sounds like this is a great topic for this group and ultimately for the Wasatch Regional Council, which I believe will be meeting in 2 weeks. Let's go to number 3 on our list, which is the Wasatch Choice Vision and Regional Transportation Plan update. Now, developing a Wasatch Choice, the region's vision and regional transportation plan is a very complex endeavor. It involves forecasting our future land use and patterns of growth, as well as exploring transportation ideas that connect us to these future destinations. Now, today we're going to drill down into those two pieces. I'm excited to welcome Mayor Petro. I've seen her just walked in. Okay, thanks for joining us. Chad Wilkinson from Layton to talk about how the regional Wasatch Choice Vision has played a role in their local planning. They will join us a little later to discuss their application. However, I'd like to turn the time now over to Ted and have him go ahead and do some introductory comments. So, Ted.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And Jordan, if you would, pull up our presentation. So in the process of updating the Wasatch Choice Vision, the mayor talked about this. Go to the next slide. On this item, so there's 2 items on the agenda. This item is focused on the land use side of the Wasatch Choice Vision, and then the next item is on the transportation side. So within this item, we wanted to preview with you these workshops that kick off just next week, which really get at both of these questions, transportation and land use. There's this key question that is, we have within each local government and within the region, what should be our pattern of growth? And so we want to highlight some new resources that we're putting together to help communities and the region explore that. And then, this is an interesting thing. We collaborate together on putting the Wasatch Choice Vision framework in place. What are the centers and major land uses that are affected and in turn affect our transportation system? How do they add up to a great quality of life? But on the land use side, it is always the responsibility of each local government to then take their vision and advance it into local planning and zoning. And we thought it would be interesting and useful to get a case study of that, to hear from Layton and have them reflect on the relationship with Wasatch Choice and how these things play out locally a little bit here. So those are the 3 items just on this first land use focus. Let's go to the next slide, Jordan. We're in the middle, and we've talked about this as a regional growth committee. We're in the middle of, we're just going to kick off a public engagement opportunity around our needs and aspirations. We have the local government workshops, which we'll touch on. We're also doing meetings with the private sector, nonprofit, our agency partners as well. And then as we get into 2025, we'll be working through the refinement of the ideas that are brought out through those 4 rows above that. Just kind of lay of the land on process. Jordan? Now, these fall workshops, I think, how many of you have been to one of these? And online, you can use your fake yellow hand or your real hand. Bert Granberg, by the way, has a real but fake yellow hand that he holds up. It's kind of hilarious. You know, I'm a city councilor in North Salt Lake. I love these workshops because we don't have, as city councilors or key staff, anything like it, in which we can do 2 things. We can come together as a community, council, mayor, planning commission, key staff, we're all together. We can talk about a few focused items as a community, and we can network with nearby communities that have a lot of the same kinds of issues. And those 2 opportunities, I think, are quite rare. Our first workshop is just next week on the 16th in Perry, and we're super excited about it. We wanted to preview this and see if you have any suggestions as we start wrapping up our preparations. Let's go to the next slide. The idea in these workshops is that we accomplish 2 major objectives. Communities reflect on their Wasatch Choice centers and other key land uses with an eye towards how those interplay with their transportation ideas, not just as a community, but how those ideas play out with nearby communities. That's really the magic of Wasatch Choice. Let's coordinate infrastructure and transportation with an eye toward a better quality of life. Next slide. So the map will show the existing regional transportation plan, the ideas that we have vetted in the past, but let's reevaluate them. Let's affirm them. It will also have the Beehive Bikeways network. A year ago in workshops like this, we did a bit of a key focus on active transportation. We've brought those ideas in a refined draft network of high comfort, high safety routes that would connect to major land uses in each area. Want to affirm that or modify it with the participants, and then of course have them explore and update their Wasatch Choice centers and other land uses. So that's the map. The map is not a blank slate map. The map is where we're starting from the existing plan. Next slide. And so, and then, you know, people, the participants can explore. These are tools. They don't have to be limited to these tools, but they can put markers down. You can see the categories here. So you're familiar with the metro, urban, city, neighborhood centers, the centers of the Wasatch Choice Vision. And then we are all very interested in and want to coordinate transportation and land use also with other major destinations. Maybe we don't have all of them here, but it starts to get rounded out when we think of educational centers, key employment districts. We're not talking about one office building. We're talking about a district, an industrial district, and special districts. Special districts might be places like an airport, Hill Air Force Base. Somebody help me out here. Yeah, that's good enough. All right. So there's this land use piece, and you know, put down the stickers, draw the little boundaries. We welcome your reflection on that. We've used those categories before. Those are in the current Wasatch Choice Vision. And you can jump in if you have something, and I'll keep going though with an eye towards not being too long-winded. On the transportation ideas, this is the tape that we want to propose that we'll use. So they can actually stick down tape that represents different transportation ideas and aspirations, and you can see them up there. I won't do a dramatic reading unless you really want me to do a dramatic reading, and then I can do that. Carlton?
At the risk of you going back one slide, can you tell me, is there an option to choose multiple categories? Because I think so often we try to compartmentalize, but the reality is, especially as you get into a true town center, you're going to have an overlay, right? And I just wonder how you're thinking about that.
So that I can understand your question is it might be like, hey, we envision an urban center, but it's going to have an educational focus.
Yeah.
Would that be an example?
Yeah, I think the days of that, what is it, Euclidean type of thing, like you only have one use kind of thing, is going by the wayside. I mean, this is really what you're trying to encourage with the Wasatch Choice Vision. And I wonder if there's a sort of interwoven thought process about how a community might be looking at, multiple uses, I guess. And maybe that falls under one of those categories.
Well, Carlton, this is such a great point because as you said, the integration of transportation, land use, where people live, where people work, parks and open spaces, schools, et cetera, that is by definition what centers are. So rather than what you don't see in this list of uses is residential, job, park, whatever. What you see, there are certain areas that certainly an industrial district is going to be a single use area. That makes sense, right? An airport is going to be a single use area. And then in fact, there are some areas, employment district, like warehousing on the west side of Salt Lake, for example, that are going to be single use areas. But centers, by definition, metropolitan, urban, city, and neighborhood centers are mixed use in their design. And that's the point, a lot of the point. Petra will talk about this momentarily, how Layton has identified areas. Mayor Dandoy has done this in Roy City. I mean, you could go around the region with areas identifying centers where there is, in fact, exactly as you're saying, a mix of uses. And so thank you for highlighting this. And that's the idea behind communities identifying where their centers are now and where they want future centers to be or enhancements to those centers. Thank you.
And the basic idea in these workshops is community should get across their vision in any way they want to. And if these tools don't enable them to do that, they can go off script, or they can combine anything they want to do that really helps them put forward their intention, their vision. So it's a great question. I appreciate that. And then we'll have to figure out what we do with it.
Ted, can I just also, one point of emphasis, communities should get across their desired future. Why? In part so that the transportation planning can be adequately coordinated with desired local future development and land use, right? That's why we have WFRC, UDOT, UTA, the Transportation Commission. We do this work together so we can coordinate local land use that's desired and development with regional transportation investment.
Could I just add on to that as well? Because excellent points, all of these. And I think what we also are now doing in addition to that is we are trying to maximize our total infrastructure costs, right? So that includes your sewer, your water delivery, all of these other components that in the past might not have been such as a critical level. But the more that we build in and do infill building, and then as we're heading out, maximizing our infrastructure costs by knowing the alignment that is in that preferred alignment in that region really makes a huge difference. So I just want to add that piece of it too, because it goes beyond what we are doing. We are looking at the total, how this can be maximized in a way that aligns with that community.
Jordan, okay. And so there's those, exploring transportation ideas if people have them, but they may not have a particular kind of solution in their mind. And so the right side is, look, we have an issue. We want all of us to be aware of an issue, safety, congestion, a beautification need. It could be something else. And would love your thoughts on if a category should be added into that issues space, because this is the literal slide that we would use just next week. As you're considering that, go to the next one, Jordan. And so that's the kind of idea there. I'll pause here.
Ted, there's two comments online from Mayor Zoltansky and from Professor Ewing.
Great. Mayor Zoltansky?
Thank you. If you can go back to the last slide, please. safety improvement is coded in red. It seems like it should be in yellow or orange for safety, like safety caution tapes, yellow, orange cones and things like that. It just seems intuitive for safety. That's just me, my preference, but I think that's kind of universal.
Thanks, Mayor. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Let's go to Reed and then, if that's okay, Reed.
Sure, thank you. Could you go to the previous slide? Yeah, Ted, would you describe the difference between metro, urban, city, and neighborhood centers? Is it just a matter of scale, or is there a more subtle difference?
This is a great question, and it's actually a really good cue up into Megan, who's going to actually work through that definition just a little bit more. This is part of the new resources that we're just putting together, which is let's help everybody understand what is meant by the menu, and also like picture what the recipe is to create that place. What are a little bit of the details that would cause an urban center to be a really effective gathering place within a community? So it's a great question. We're gonna circle back to it.
The short answer, though, is yes, it is a measure of a level of intensity, and we'll get into more detail about that momentarily. Thanks, Professor.
Carlton.
On your transportation choices, I know you have fast kind of core.
Go to the next one, Jordan.
But I also wonder about, while I thought about microtransit, it's probably as flexible as can be, but a normal bus line, because how you think about that, as we are looking to finalize our 5-year plan, we're actually starting to run some bus line in some industrial area because that's probably a demand that I hear more from employers about how do they get employees to there. And to be honest, how they position the industrial buildings to the road makes a big difference on how successful that bus line is, even if it's 30-minute service or even 60. And so having some thought along that line would make a big difference down the line, or literally down the line, about how viable it is.
So at the top, you see it's labeled fast frequent buses. How does that hit you, or you think that's too narrow?
It's a little too narrow in the sense of, when we talk about fast, we're talking 15-minute service. I'm looking at our good friend over here to see if he kicks me, but but I think 30-minute service is not impractical, and it's more likely to occur in like an industrial area, for example.
If I could offer one maybe way to think about this, and obviously I work closely with my UTA friends, and so I hear exactly what you're saying, Carlton. I wonder if the Wasatch Choice is a regional vision, and so we're thinking about regionally significant infrastructure and lines, and so I wonder if like the regular local bus falls into the same category as like a local road, and that perhaps maybe that's why it's not captured here. And so that's a discussion that maybe we ought to have about how deep to go and how regional to keep it. The point you make about the land use, though, and orienting businesses in a way that are future transit ready, I think is a really good one, though. And I wonder if as we're talking about the centers and the way we design centers, if maybe that's the place to capture that.
This is a really helpful point, Ted, Mayor, as we think about what the Wasatch Choice Vision is and what it isn't, right? It is meant to be a depiction of desired regionally significant future uses. That sounds so wonky. I've been doing this job a while. We're not trying to say, exactly where UTA puts neighborhood bus service routes, right? We're not trying to say where Clinton City's exact roadway, local roadway improvements are. We're not trying to say how a specific parcel in West Weber is developed, right? It is at a level that is higher than that of regional significance, but it integrates with that. So I think this conversation is helpful for us to make sure we're communicating clearly what the regional vision is and isn't. So thank you.
Can I add one more topic there? Okay, this is like when you say futuristic, and I think that this is not identified here, but perhaps it might be something that we need to consider, knowing that what it takes to get these plans in place. What about our vertiports and our, air taxis? I think that might need to start bubbling up now so that folks can start identifying those type of areas as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And maybe what we do is we make it explicit that, look, you may have ideas that are not, they don't fit within this description, and you shouldn't be limited by this. But I appreciate that very much.
Che Mosqueda from our staff, Mayor, who is our point person working on advanced air mobility, was nodding at your comment. So that's an endorsement. So.
And at the One Utah Summit, there was a presentation made state about those very things. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly in the planning, at least, right? Yeah, and just I'll make my color comment right now, Ted, and that is just to promote. When like 10 years ago, when I was a citizen planning commissioner in Kaysville City, I attended my first one of these, and it was in Fruit Heights, I recall. And I was quite amazed at it. I just went because I thought it would be interesting, and I was invited, and it was quite a remarkable eye-opening experience. And so there's my color comment promoting.
Remarkable, like this happens? I didn't even know this happens. And communities working together, transportation, land use, all being planned together. Yeah.
It was well organized. There were, big papers and all of us around working together and brainstorming. It was amazing to me. I still remember it very clearly, my first one. And I've been to others. So there's my color comment.
I appreciate that. And I'll just note that, so it's not just exploring, it's also affirming. And again, that's why the map will start out that way. Now let's keep going, Jordan. Key question, what should be our pattern of growth? I am going to hand, blessedly, everybody will be grateful that I'm going to hand the baton to Megan here in just a second. But part of the reason why we look at land use and transportation together are the transportation and infrastructure impacts. And so if you look at the image above and the below, they're both a future with the same number of homes and jobs. But you see on the image below, it covers less land area. It would require less infrastructure. It has stronger centers, which could then perhaps mean you can have better public transportation, and people are able to connect to more destinations. So these things do have impacts on transportation. When we backed up and looked at the entire vision, we studied the impact of the vision's land use pattern. Go to the next slide. And we saw, one more, that with the vision's coordination of land use and transportation, people could get to 30% more job opportunities within a typical commute. And one more, and that because the footprint of growth is not as extensive, we could save $5 billion approximate in local infrastructure costs. So these are sort of the why behind the coordination of land use and transportation. Now, we've talked about these already, all of the different Wasatch Choice land uses. We have new resources. Go to the next one. The new resources are really focused on the Wasatch Choice centers. And I'm going to hand the baton to Meg Pageant to talk about these new resources. Meg?
Thanks, Ted. I am going to flip back to this slide just really briefly because I want to acknowledge there are a lot of important land uses in our region, right? These employment districts, the industrial districts. We do also have on the Wasatch Choice Vision primarily residential areas, maybe served by some highway retail, right? These are not necessarily centers, but they're really important still. We're going to talk about centers today because they're a little more complicated and they're also very important places in our region.
Meg, I'm going to double down on the comment you made because I think it's really important. Go back one slide. We talk a lot about centers here at WFRC as as a key strategy to effectively absorbing growth in a way that you in your communities decide that that's what you want for your areas. And I just want to be really clear, we are not trying to dictate to anybody, to any private property owner, to any local community, how you should develop. And in fact, as Meg noted, the majority of the land area, if you look at the map behind over Meg's right shoulder, that's the Wasatch Choice Vision map, the majority of the land area on the Wasatch Front is single-family residential development. And actually, by creating more opportunities for growth, new growth to be absorbed in centers, that actually helps us preserve the character of single-family residential areas, and even reduce the impacts on critical farmlands, et cetera. So we are trying to strike a balance in this work from a regional perspective. And as Meg just said, getting centers right can be more complicated. So we put a lot of focus on that to help you achieve those centers. But overall, it's a balance. Thank you, Meg.
Sure. Okay, so a lot of this has been said. I'll go through this kind of quickly, but in these workshops, we're going to be asking you, your cities, to look at the centers you have on the Wasatch Choice Vision, talk amongst your staff, your council. You know, is this still a center we want? Is it the right type of center? Is it the right boundary? And in order to do that, we think it's really important that you understand what we mean when we say centers. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. A center can be a lot of things. It should be really different for every city, but it's always three things. It's always walkable. These are places that are walkable. You might picture areas in your community with lots of retail, lots of residential, but they're not necessarily walkable, right? There's some different kind of land use. They're a mix of uses. Places you can go to live, work, and play, but they're always a mix of uses, right? One really important use is residential uses. And then there are a multitude of other uses. And they're always more intense than the surrounding area, right? Focused activity. So walkable, mixed, more intense than the surrounding area. And then there's a lot of other things that actually make them work, right? They've got to have a mix of uses, and here's a list of potentially really great uses. On that list is public space. That's a really key component of this, right? Because these are intended to be places that people feel like, this is where I'm in my community. I'm in the center. I'm where the people are. Civic uses, a lot of centers are anchored by potentially city hall or other civic uses. There might be retail, there might be dining, office, and those rooftops support all of those uses, right? So that's why it's important that there's also housing there. Centers are not strip malls, and they're not our auto-oriented places. Those are important places too. And then there's other things that make the center beautiful and fun and exciting, like those community gathering spaces might be activated with events. There's interest, right? Maybe there's different lighting in the center than in the rest of your city. Unique architecture, things like wayfinding signage so you can get around, pedestrian-oriented items like shade trees or signs that you can actually read as a pedestrian walking by a building rather than a car zooming by the highway, right? Parking is maybe behind the buildings, or it's somewhere else that you're not walking through parking lots to access your destinations, but there's parking there, right? There's a way to get there in your car or by other modes of transportation. There's destinations, right? You're not walking for exercise, there's somewhere to go, programming, greenery, right? There's all these things that make a center special. Okay, so Ted alluded to some resources that we have. These are always a little hard to visualize, right? We're talking about all these things. Maybe you're thinking of places you've been before, but we've created renderings that might help you visualize these in your community. These zoomed out bird's eye view are a little tough to see on the screen, but they're really detailed when you're actually on your own screen. So I'm gonna go through the 4 different types of centers and kind of give you what the differences are. Importantly, there's 4 different types of centers so that your community can find what works for you. A neighborhood center is the first of those. This is the least intense center, maybe 1 to 3 stories. A transit might serve this center, it might be a standard bus service. These are areas in maybe a less dense community, maybe a dense community, but they have maybe a small grocer, a salon, maybe some kind of beverage shop, a coffee shop. City Hall might be there, and there's public space there, right? The heart of a small or a slightly bigger community. And there's maybe some housing choice that isn't in the rest of the city, like a townhome or a smaller lot, single family unit. And there's some additional visualizations that come with these renderings. This is an example of what might be in a neighborhood center, right? You have a few 1 to 2 story retail shops surrounding some public space, place to play. And you can imagine that this might only be visited by people in your city, in your community, right? This might not have a huge catchment. People from all over the region might not go there, but it kind of serves your little community. The next center is a city center. Maybe that's up to 4 stories about, right? These are approximate. And maybe this is served by enhanced bus, right? A little bit more frequent transit. Might be just a little bit more density there. You can see all this really great pedestrian infrastructure in these renderings. Lots of housing choice in this image, townhomes, condos maybe. And you can see a little city hall type use down here as well. The next city center, or the next center type, is the urban center. Maybe this has a minimum of 2 stories in the area that's identified as the center, and up to 8 stories. That density really is relative to each city. And maybe this one's served by bus rapid transit, right? This is somewhere where you really have a physical presence of a transit station.
Meg,
Maybe.
would you mind going back and I'm just going to do a quick interjection, but a couple things about this. One, so we have these models. We can go in and do new shots from different angles. So we actually have this as a digital model now. That's part of what is cool about the new resource. And then you see those words on the right. Part of the idea is to show, look, in order to create this kind of place, some of the details have to be worked through. And a big one is, how do you deal with the parking challenge? But then there's questions about circulation and the like. And so we're hoping that these are useful to also kind of drill down into, okay, what are some of the details that you've got to work through in order to kind of create a great place? Thanks, Meg.
Sure. Okay, again, some additional renderings. This rendering actually has a street that can be converted into what we call a festival street. That's a street you could close down for events with those bollards, lots of pedestrian infrastructure, shade. You can see lots of different uses. And maybe there's regional employment here, right? Maybe people are actually like, think of Lehigh, people commute there for work. And so they're getting off the train station. They're there all day, dining and things like that. But people live there at night too. So it doesn't become this ghost town after 5 o'clock. Some more examples. And then finally, the Metro Center. Now, this is not all over our region. We only have a couple of these. Ogden, Salt Lake, Provo is becoming more of a Metro Center. This might be where you have higher rise buildings, 3 to 20 plus stories. Rail transit serves this type of a center. And this has a regional draw, right? You might come from all over the region to go to downtown Salt Lake. So you can kind of think of the people coming to these centers as growing as the center gets a little bit more dense. And maybe there's theaters there, right? Regional entertainment, concerts. This is a little amphitheater, right? And you can see 6+ story buildings behind this amphitheater. And so this hopefully gives you a little bit of a concept of these different center types and why we have them. They are really different, and they still can look really different in your community compared to these renderings. But it helps to put a visual to the concept. Why do we talk about centers? Well, there's all kinds of benefits, right? Walking, biking, transit use increase with centers. Property and sales tax per acre is higher, so these might support some of the things you're trying to do in the rest of your community with revenue. Street and utility costs per unit is lower. You have units closer together, right? You can imagine sewer, water infrastructure has to go less far. You're doing less maintenance on the roads because they're covering less ground. Indoor and outdoor water use per unit might decrease. A lot of that's landscaping, right? You don't have these big yards. Residents will feel a sense of place. This is something that people find to be really positive in their city. I'm a Holiday resident, and I sat outside 3 Cups from 4 to 6 yesterday, and I just felt really at home in Holiday's little town center. And then they give you the ability to maintain open space, larger lots, or other established businesses elsewhere in your community, right? They're supporting activity in the rest of your community as it is. So I'm gonna pass it to Leighton now.
And Meg, can you comment on when are those resources gonna be made available or approximate? How do communities get those?
Okay, so we have our workshops upcoming. We'll be working through some of this stuff with your cities. We are still underway with the consultant producing some of this stuff. We've been working on it since the spring. There's a phase 2 coming around, but soon we'll have these up on our Wasatch Choice website. So you'll be able to access what we have and it'll grow over time.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Appreciate that. Any comments, questions, please?
Yeah, I wanted to just emphasize one of the benefits, the property and sales tax per acre. I feel like that's a powerful metric to consider for our planning purposes. And that gets to the heart of what we're trying to do, I think. So having that be a driver metric, I think is worth considering. And then along those lines, I wanted to ask about 2 separate things. The first being, we're very well aligned with our land use and our transportation planning. I wonder how well we're connected with economic development folks that are making often firm level decisions that would directly impede or enhance the kind of the revenue per acre. That's one. The second one I want to ask about is you talk about these different centers. Building height seems to be a defining characteristic. I don't know, do we need to be so restrictive on that, particularly if the market wants to build higher? That'll help drive that powerful metric in a way that maybe we don't need to restrain so forcefully. So 2 questions on that important metric.
Sure, I would love, thank you, Mayor. I would love to speak to the sales tax per acre thing. I gave a really brief summary. Part of our resources we're putting together is actually really detailed data on some of that. So that'll be available to you as well, where we've looked at these literally by rendering, looked at the increase in all these different benefits, water use, sales tax per acre, and things like that. So there'll be some data that comes along with this. And we also, of course, have our economic development district as one of the committees here. We'll be presenting the same thing to them next week, but that's a really great point. It's sort of the 3-legged stool, right? Land use, transportation, and economic development. And they all really are one and the same. One thing I like to say is that good land use and transportation planning is economic development in a lot of ways, but having those industry professionals involved is absolutely key.
And it gets at tax policy also. So for all of you in the local government space, as you think about what local sales taxes, what property taxes you need to have in place in your communities to generate the revenue for your critical services, the point that Kevin and Meg are talking about, your development patterns impact your revenue streams and then can help you balance out the need to increase your local taxes. So it's all part of a bigger picture. Thanks for highlighting that, Kevin. Yeah. Meg, did you want to comment on the building heights as well?
Oh, well, that's a policy question for cities, right? And of course, there's a lot of advantages to letting the market speak. I am a big proponent of having that conversation early, and the public and the private sector really communicating about that, because there's all kinds of reasons that the 5-story doesn't work and the 8 does or the 3 does or whatever. And so I do think being overly restrictive can hurt the ability to implement a center, but it's really important. I just think it's just important to communicate openly.
Okay, thank you. Laura, and then if you would, I think we got Professor Ewing had a comment. Laura, please. Yours.
I was just going to compliment you all on this effort. I feel like it's really hard for people to visualize something different than what's on the ground in their communities today. And so I think this is really, really helpful. So.
Go ahead, Beth, and then we'll go to Professor Ewing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to also talk about some of the successes that I think initially have been as a result of some of the HTRZ legislation that has really utilized that whole, here's what this community wants to do. Here's how they've coordinated it with not just a transit agency, but their MPO, wherever they're located. We've had some in Utah County, some in Salt Lake County, and some in Davis County. And how all of these are trying to coordinate logistically is taking off some of those height restrictions perhaps, or they're looking at other ways to create strategic density within their community. For instance, the requirement for HTRZs is 50 units an acre or more, right? So you're letting the market dictate that. And I think that has been a piece of how we can resolve some of these areas, certainly in transit areas where there's rail and or a BRT. But I think when you look at this more broadly, I think that Clinton, for instance, could do something along those lines. They don't have a transit, they don't have rail, but yet they have an opportunity to be strategic about how they're looking at their city, and how that's going to how they're going to maximize and what is it that their residents are going to look at. And I think that you can, as a city, look at that. And everything is based on how you, as that community, are looking at this region. And I just think that there's a lot of great ways to look at strategic density in that way.
Clinton may not be able to do an HDRZ, but they could do a FIZ or a HOPS. We've got the acronym soup of development tools.
Those are not the local beverage shops I'm talking about. Those are actually legislation.
And one quick question, can we give you guys some dimensions or some acreage and you can kind of edit that fairly easily?
Through a transportation and land use connection project, we could definitely do that. That would be, yeah, we can dive into this for your city, absolutely.
I love that question.
Takes a little time, but let's work on it.
Perfect. Professor Ewing, you had a comment, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, as Andrew and Ted know, we've studied centers across the United States and looked at regional transportation plans and the way centers are designated. 90% of the plans do include designation of centers. So that's become the dominant regional paradigm, a regional planning paradigm, centers connected by high quality transit. And we, using travel data from the different regions, have modeled VMT, vehicle miles traveled, and we've modeled percentage of walk trips and percentage of transit trips, and found that there are thresholds above which these centers tend to produce really good outcomes. And I'm wondering if you might want to get more quantitative, have something like activity density, kind of a target density for an urban center, street connectivity comes up a lot, the proportion of non-residential versus residential is specified in a lot of the plans. Would it make sense to have some targets? I know you've got the height, building height as, or number of stories as a target, but more specifically, people do think in terms of density, do think in terms of mix, do think in terms of transit stop density and so on. And these are things that one could include in the description of these different centers.
Any comment on that?
Okay, Reed, a couple of thoughts on that. So first of all, with these images, we will share a lot of detail, including what's the land use mix, what's the floor to area ratio, even what's the parking standard. So there's a lot of detail behind it, but these are intended to illustrate an outcome rather than prescribe a specific outcome. And I think that maybe the kind of resources that you're talking about would be helpful in that as well. As in, you know, as you reach these thresholds for connectivity or FAR or mix, you start to see these kinds of benefits. And then, you know, we can have that be part of the resource package. And then one additional component on this. So Meg listed all of those bullet points of benefits. What we will be doing is we'll have a specific estimated impact on those kinds of metrics, you know, fiscal sustainability, mode split, VMT, that relate to those specific images so that people can get a sense of when they're talking about that image, this is the kind of benefit that we get from that. And so there will be kind of a real specific kind of forecast, but then your national resources, I think, can be a super good companion to that. And we'd love to talk with you more about how we wrap that in.
Yeah, I'll resend the article that we published. I think I sent it to both of you a few months ago. I'll resend it. Thank you, Ted. Andrew.
Thanks. Just a couple other things. So you heard me say maybe probably 100 times throughout that presentation, right? And part of that is because this does look different for everybody. And I do want to be really clear that the building heights are more to categorize rather than targets or anything like that, right? However, we are going to turn our attention next year once you've all told us more about where exactly your centers are and what your vision is. We do want to turn our attention more to helping implement. And so all kinds of resources like what Reed is talking about is what we're going to focus on. And then when we're talking about how to implement, that's really where some of these targets might get set for your specific city, right? Because we do know a lot about how to make these work. And so we can be really intentional and data-driven in that way.
Thank you, Megan. Mayor Zotowski, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. Well, this is very timely and relevant and exciting for me to hear because Sandy's just undergone our general plan process and we've just now started submitting to our land use authorities, the Planning Commission, and it goes to the City Council later this month. So perfectly timed presentation. I have a couple observations. This is very aligned with what we're seeing from the consultants and how our master plan is shaping up with neighborhood centers and urban centers and the variety. Looking at these beautiful renderings, these models, gosh, I would love to have 100 acres of area to develop. Can these models be tailored for redevelopment? So where we already have kind of an existing mix, and if so, gosh, I can't ask you fast enough if you could come and present this portion to our city council. Allison Stroud, Councilmember Stroud, is on the line. I know that she would be as enthusiastic to have this presentation because we have this queued up right now, and it's such a good discussion about the benefits and the limitations of each aspect. So I don't know if you'd be able to present this to a city specifically, and maybe we could time it so that it falls in our master plan, early in our master planning. And also, I'm not sure when our Southeast Valley workshop part is, but it's going to help educate our residents as well. So if we could move to the front of the presentation queue, because this is happening right now in Sandy in the coming 6 weeks.
Thanks, Mayor. And yes, this will be presented at workshops where, of course, Planning Commission and City Council will be invited. We also can come to you for sure, if that's helpful. For simplicity's sake, I didn't show this piece, but all of those renderings actually have an existing condition. Some of those are greenfield development, but most of those are actually existing. Maybe it's aging commercial or dated industrial areas. So they all actually have an existing condition, some of them 2 different existing conditions possible, and then the like redeveloped ultimate the achievement of the center, right, that was envisioned. So they might be helpful in that way too. And then again, as we are with Sandy, through a Transportation and Land Use Connection program award, we can always dive deeper for your specific cities and bring this very same consultant that's helping us, to do that, whatever it is.
Well, thank you. That's great comments and certainly some real insight. Mayor Petro, we appreciate your patience with that. If you'd like to go ahead and kind of talk about implementation with us now. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first off, I want to say thank you for allowing us to come today and present. I've got with me our Community and Economic Director, Mr. Chad Wilkinson, and then also online we have Weston Apolloni, who's also in the works with Chad at our staff level. But as I sit in this room and listen, I mean, my mind's just going in 5 different directions because everything that's been brought up here, I think that we've actually had to deal with it at some point in time here. And Chad's going to share with you a lot of different examples of pretty much most of those type of options that you have for your town centers. I do want to just quickly speak. I'm not going to take up much time because I know that, we want to move this meeting along. The tools and the opportunity and the staff and the knowledge that is here that's available at Wasatch Front Regional Council is really what helps you get the message across, not only to your council members and to those folks that you're trying to kind of educate, but more, even the impact of the residents and their ability to help you put together not only your general plan, but even type of town center hearings. We've been through that process. We went through one just recently. And when you're talking about the collaboration with transportation, with UDOT, UTA, I mean, all of that has come into play. And in the time that I've been in office, I've been able to witness that firsthand. So I have to speak highly of the importance of the connectivity with all the different organizations and how you can really benefit your city, whether you're dealing with greenfield or redevelopment. Because like I said, I've had the opportunity to do with that. And I just want to say thank you, because we've got an example of thinking forward back when we were first talking about Highway 89, knowing that we needed to expand that. And the road was going to be up high the whole time. And then luckily residents came in, we got input. And as you travel there, you'll see that there's a lot of recess areas. But what came out of that is two positive things. One is we were forward thinking in knowing that we needed to put an underground pedestrian pass to get underneath that Highway 89, which will then benefit not only with your pedestrian traffic, but as we talk about the Utah trails and bikeways, that's another avenue that we're going to be able to eventually tie in to several cities along the Wasatch Front there that can use that, particularly on the east side. And then in addition to that, we have a nice piece of ground there that we're going to work to collaboratively to develop into a town center that like I said, we've been through this process. We're able to get a lot of input from our residents in that area. And like Chad will get into the detail on that, but I have to say that that's the purpose of this organization. And when you're asking about those different slides or those images, can you hone in? Yes. And they are very effective. And I know Chad and his team has used those time and time again, and they really paint a great picture. So with that, I'm just going to end with one more thing, and I'm going to say that my years of experience in the retail business, we always looked at your core circle of where your draw is going to be and how you're going to support that area. The town centers are that, but outside of that town center, as we talk about how we have so much of our existing residents are in single family homes, take those into consideration. Understand the demographics within your area of your city, because in every area of your city, it changes, and you need to be able to develop those to bring in those folks as well, so that you do have that community environment that you're trying to create. So I'm going to turn the time over to Chad and allow him to kind of get into details here.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what the mayor said about the importance of this partnership we've had with the Wasatch Front Regional Council. A lot of the work that you're going to see was directly supported by transportation land use connection grants that we've received. So specifically that town center that the mayor just talked about up at Gordon Avenue and Highway 89 was a TLC project, our plan for that. So we're really excited about that partnership. It's none of this would have been possible without that great, strong partnership. I also want to
as just real quick, as you said that the TLC, our Transportation Land Use Connection Program, is in of itself a partnership between WFRC, UDOT contributes, UTA contributes, in Salt Lake County contributes. So there's a lot of partnership to make that Transportation Land Use Connection Program work so that we can partner with you. So thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm just going to, there's so much we could talk about today. And I think what Ted had asked us to do is talk a little bit about our experience in implementing these town centers. We're about 5 years into our general plan now. I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. But so I'm going to talk about a lot of town centers, and it's going to be a little bit rapid fire because I really want to talk about lessons learned and some things that we've, that we would do differently maybe, and also some things we think have gone very well through this process. So with that, I want to acknowledge a couple other things. I want to acknowledge, again, Weston Apollone's online. I came into this process about 6 months before this general plan was adopted. To use a football analogy, my role was really, I was that lineman who pushed the running back across the goal line. So a lot of the work was already done, by the time I got there. But I also want to acknowledge, I just saw him walk by a second ago, Tim Watkins, who's now here with Wasatch Front Regional Council, was a very, very important part of this process in getting this general plan adopted. So just to show really quickly, it may be a little bit hard to see. Is there a pointer here as well that I can point at something, or kind of, huh? Yeah, it doesn't show very well. We'll be okay. So just to show you on the map, you can see that this, again, general plan adopted in 2019 was really based on the Wasatch Choice Vision framework. It's a series of town centers connected by mixed-use corridors. We took our own spin on it, which I think it's okay for communities to do. We have town centers and urban districts is what we call them. I'll talk about those in just a minute. But we also identified some areas that I'm not going to talk about, which are our business districts. And those are in that kind of blue color with the yellow stars. Those kind of salmon, can I say salmon color maybe? Pink salmon? That's our, with the red stars, that's our town centers. You can see they're just distributed, dispersed throughout the city there. And then those urban centers are the kind of darker red maroon color there. And I'll talk a little bit more about each of those. So very important to establish those town centers. This was a very well, there was a high level of participation from the public in creating this general plan. It was about a 5-year process. We had an envision latent process that occurred first, and then which was, again, high participation. And then we had our actual latent forward, which is what we call our general plan. That process, again, we had, as high a participation that I've ever seen in a public process. Thousands of people commented via online comments, individual community meetings, charrettes. So very highly participated. And that's a key point that I'll come back to later. That high participation by the public and that buy-in is critical in implementing town centers. And I'll get into that in just a minute. So that's kind of an overview of that general plan. Just to get into a couple of these different scenarios, we talked about this a bit, but there are really, I guess, 3 different categories of our town centers. One are these greenfield town centers. These are areas, of course, that they're farmland for the most part, or were farmland. Mayor talked about Gordon and 89, which is up there on the screen. That is a property that is owned by the Utah Department of Transportation. It was purchased as part of the Highway 89 expansion and renovation project. That was their staging yard. It was an orchard before that. They purchased it many, many years ago. So it was farmland before they used it as that staging area. We just went through and then on the right-hand side of that slide is the West Layton Town Center. Again, farmland. The major property owner out there is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we have some other property owners as well on that one. That one is still in some initial stages, hasn't had a lot of the detailed planning work done. However, the Gordon 89 Town Center has, and through that TLC grant that we received. Yes.
Sorry. What are the main streets by that second one? I'm so curious.
I wish I could point better. So this,
use your built-in pointer.
It's,
I mean, your arm and your finger.
Oh, thank you.
I'm familiar with the names of the streets, so I was hoping at least to know that. Right, and that one I knew, but the other one.
700 West Expansion. This is Hillfield, Gentile.
Ah.
If you go further to the south, you'll find the West Davis corridor running right over.
Very good. So out close to the highway. Okay, good. Thank you.
So those are 2 greenfield examples. Just to get in a little bit deeper to the details of the Gordon 89. Again, funded by a TLC grant. This is a town center. Thinking about this slide now, I wish I would have put a little bit further along in the presentation, because I want to talk about some of the unique, I guess, challenges that we had with further planning a greenfield town center. This was an area that was identified in the general plan, was highly accepted as an area to be a town center. In a greenfield town center, though, we found that this is a little bit different in implementation than a established town center. And that is to say that with these greenfield town centers, there's still a lot of real public passion about what should be there. We saw a lot more public input and participation, some concern with how this would develop. But just to give an idea, again, I'm going to use the built-in pointer. I'll say it and then I'll go up the point. This is a mixed-use walkable town center. It's got a grocery anchor that's anticipated. We've had interest from some notable grocery folks that want to be there. But it also has high-density residential that feathers into lower-density residential along some of our boundaries with the existing single-family residential. Also some recreational amenities. along the boundaries and some good connections into our existing trails and other recreation. So I'm just going to point some of those. Hopefully I can say it loud enough you can hear me.
Well, you can just
I can
carry the
take
mic.
this with me,
Yeah,
can I?
there you go.
This is great. Now that I know I can do this, maybe no, I don't know. I'm not going to do that. This is the grocery anchor, our recreational opportunities here, predominantly townhome development south of Gordon Avenue. This is Highway 89, Gordon Avenue. We've got these were actually designed to look like two-story commercial buildings. They're actually just one-story commercial buildings with that design element. Could be two-story if a developer wanted to, but the idea is to create a kind of an enclosed space there that can become this town center, grocery anchor. Again, some duplex, triplex type situations on this side. This is where high density was anticipated. This is one of the things that our neighborhood said. We originally had 4-story multifamily homes there, and the neighborhood said, no, we appreciate you need some multifamily, but 4 stories is too much. And they said, we're okay with 3, but we don't want 4. So that was modified to a 3-story element there through that process. Yeah, that's why this is an important thing that they said, we want this to be right on your plan, 3-story maximum. That was something for the public. But again, good public support, just a little bit more involvement than some of these other ones I'm going to talk about. So that's kind of our greenfield examples. Now I want to talk about what I call the established town centers. These are areas that were already working towards being town centers. They were areas with really good commercial elements already in place. One of the things we noticed was that as we went through this process, that we needed some supporting residential. Some of these were good, thriving commercial areas. Others weren't thriving commercial areas. They needed that additional residential component to help them to thrive. So we've identified that. We've had projects go forward in both of these. On the left-hand side is the Gordon Avenue and Fairfield Town Center. That particular one has a grocery store that they've survived. They've struggled a little bit, but we've seen already with the inclusion of some additional higher density residential in this area that these commercial areas have also begun to see some additional positive impacts as they can now walk to their shopping across the street. All these areas, the things that were identified by Meg, these are areas that are either they're walkable or they will be. Some of these do require some retrofits to make these a little more walkable, and we're working on those things as well. We're also taking a deeper look. We have another TLC grant that's working on an economic development plan that is looking at each of these town centers to say, do we need to refine those a little bit more? And we'll have some additional, that's pending. We're going to be looking at those results here in a little bit. Just to talk about, again, the areas that we're talking about here. Again, Gordon Avenue, Fairfield Road. This is the new Layton Temple on the right-hand side. Smiths, if you're familiar with the Smiths there in Layton, this is Gentile and Fairfield Road. This has been a really good example. We've had, again, mostly, I'll actually advance that slide because I think there's a slide there. This is an area where we've identified, that one actually, maybe we didn't put that in there. I'm looking to, Weston's probably going right now on the other side saying you got the wrong slide up, but this is some of the residential that's developed in there, this infill residential to try to support these existing commercial uses. Up on the other town center, this is, again, Fairfield and Gordon Avenue. We've had some mixed use development. You've got commercial on the commercial frontage on Gordon Avenue, and then residential behind. That's a 3-story multifamily project. All these projects that I'm showing on the screen today are currently under construction.
Hey, Chad, we had one question online asking about how you handle and integrate parking into these centers. Just briefly comment on that now or as you go along.
I'll do that in just a minute if that's
Good,
okay. As we
thanks.
get to our urban districts, I think that's an important point. So I think, again, this is another project that, again, right, just kitty corner from the Layton Temple, multifamily, infilling some of that. It's actually a mixed-use project with some commercial components as well. So with the urban districts, I think parking is a key component here, especially because these are our highest density areas. Just to give you an idea and orientation, on the right is our downtown. I like to say that we were a station area plan down there before station area plans were cool. We had an original station area plan there that was adopted in 2008. we're working on the official station area plan right now with some help from some of our partners. But really ours is just a refinement. We've had that in place for a long, long time. There's some notable development occurring down there right now. It's taken a long time to get off the starting blocks, but we're excited to see that. The other area there on the left is up by Layton Hills Mall, the Midtown area that we call our Midtown District. I will point out that this is, again, Layton Hills Mall is right here. I-15 runs up kind of on this, kind of bisects the slide, but this urban district is on that right-hand side of I-15 there, the east side. We have new owners of our Layton Hills Mall, which we're excited about. They have a real vision for making this, again, not just a regional shopping center, but a place, and having those walkable elements, creating public spaces, really making this into a nice walkable urban district. And this is the location of an old movie theater. It was purchased a couple of years ago by a residential developer, and that's our highest density residential project that's been approved there. 90 units to the acre. Of course, there's other places that have much higher densities, but for Layton, that's a big deal. That was a very high density project, and we hope that it'll give a shot in the arm to that development. Again, with these urban districts, a lot of what was already established was commercial. We've seen the need to really infill this with residential. That's what we're seeing go in. We've got other multifamily projects, a great project built by Destination Homes that provides some additional multifamily housing in that area, and just trying to infill those areas. I'm going to show you the downtown urban district project now. So this is a project that is currently being constructed by Rockworth Development. This is a mixed-use project, mixed-use buildings along Main Street, which would be here. Residential buildings in the back. You can see some of the exciting things that have already happened within this urban district. This is a recent redevelopment of this IHC-owned property with Tanner Clinic and some multifamily. And we just are securing the last bit of some grant money to build the pedestrian overpass across the railroad lines there. We've started the design work on that, and that'll tie all those areas together very well. So again, trying to create that walkable. Also, besides walkability, it connects to our recreation and our trails and recreation plan. We have a major trail that runs, eventually will run from the mountains to the lake that goes right through this area. So we're excited about that. I know I'm going at a whirlwind pace here, but I want to get to the lessons learned. This, I think, is the most important part, I think, of this conversation, maybe. So this slide is going to introduce that. One of the things that we found is that we can, if we're not careful, get ahead of ourselves a little bit. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we have these great general plans, but as we're working on other pieces of the puzzle, we may not get to those adoption of actual development standards. And what we've had occur in one of these areas, and I want to say right now that I love drive-through restaurants. This is not an indictment of drive-through restaurants. It's not what we had vision for this area. And this is a Jack in the Box that is under construction right now in one of our town centers. Perfectly good use, but it's very auto-oriented. Wasn't the vision for that property. So as we were focusing on some of our other town centers, we never did take the opportunity to change the zoning and the development standards for this property. And as we were working on some of these others, because there's lots of town centers, lots of moving parts, we had a great applicant, very, very good to work with, come in and say, well, we want to build here. It had the zoning. They made their application with that zoning. We worked with them to the extent that we could, but they very respectfully said, we're going to build what we can build in your zoning district. And that was a real lesson learned for us, is that now we've had the opportunity to adopt some of those standards in some of our other town centers, but that's something to keep in mind is as you're adopting these good town centers, make sure that you're following up with these design standards, these zoning standards to try to get to implement that vision. That's one of the nice things about that Gordon and 89 process is that we work closely with the Utah Department of Transportation, and we're adopting those standards up front so that when a developer comes in, they'll know exactly what we expect of them so that they can build that to that vision that we have for a walkable mixed-use town center. That's not to say we haven't had some successes there, but then again, that's just a caution. So that was I kind of jumped ahead to our second bullet point there, but I want to go back to that general plan process. One of the lessons that we've learned is that it's so important to have that early public engagement and public input. The implementation of these centers has been relatively painless, really. With Gordon 89, we had public participation. It was okay. We had a few people concerned that weren't involved in the general plan process, but it was still a great public process. implementation of some of our existing established town centers, putting some infill, higher density residential has been relatively, really easy. I mean, it's the folks that are involved in that general plan say, yeah, we expected this. We had a thoughtful discussion about where density should go, where these town centers should be located. And so when we have public hearings for zone changes in those areas to follow up on our general plan, we have very, very little pushback or any kind of really public participation at all, because they already did. They participated when they were supposed to at that general plan process. So that has been, again, a lesson learned for us, is that when you get that early public engagement, public buy-in for this type of vision, really this Wasatch Choice Vision, that the implementation of that center, it goes very well and works very well. Talked about the second one already with that example. Make sure your standards keep up with your vision for the center. We've learned that. We're doing better on that now. Not that we weren't. Again, one of the challenges when you have a larger city, I think, and multiple town centers, is that we had our focus on some of the other town centers and developing standards, and that one just was on the list, but we hadn't got to yet. So that's something I think is important to keep in mind, to make sure that you keep that vision intact. Okay, so I'm probably going to editorialize a little bit here, and I apologize. And I'm sure there's different viewpoints about this.
Thank you for yeah, we got to meet a schedule, so please continue. But we do have a schedule we have to push.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I think one thing that we've seen, we're 5 years in. One of the things that we've seen is that the public, as I said, is very receptive when we follow our plan. We've seen recent requests to increase densities outside of these town center areas and outside of these mixed-use corridors. That is met with really strong pushback, and I would say there's issues of public trust there. And I think we have good conversations going on in our state right now about building additional residential units as a component of affordability. But I would caution that when you bring forward, we've had a couple of different scenarios where folks have come in with very high density projects outside of these urban and town centers. And that has really led to some concern from residents, from elected and appointed officials about, we're all in for our plan. We want to have urban centers. We want to have town centers. We want to have density where it makes sense. But when we start to propose things outside of those that don't have good access to transit, that don't have good access to infrastructure, there starts to be a question of public trust. And we want to see our vision implemented, but not something outside of that vision. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's the end of that presentation. I hope that covered what you wanted as far as the lessons that we've learned. And again, happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Wonderful presentation. Certainly a great example of how it's really supposed to work. May I make one just comment? I think from a municipality perspective, I think you learned a lot. If there's a lot of messages we can take from this, but one message would be is, if we're about ready to engage in this, maybe you can help us, okay, as municipalities, to show us kind of how it works. Certainly we'll get the expertise from the Wasatch Regional Council, but there's something to be said about having somebody that's really done it and helping us to understand it. And I think you've got some hands-on experience with that, and that'd be very helpful for us. So thank you very much, okay? Great presentation, great for Layton.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to say that just real quick, when we're talking about kind of our greenfield, the one area where we talked about on the west side, the 2700, we've already started and engaged UTA with the possibility of looking at different bus routes and that. So when that does get developed, hopefully by then they can understand it as well. So I guess my message to all of us here is, don't hesitate, get all the team, get everybody in place now and have those discussions early.
Great comment, Mayor. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead. We'll move on to item number 4. Thank you again. Great presentation. This is the major transportation study exploring our future. It's just part of the way the regional transportation plan is built, is incorporating plans and studies that explore smaller geographical areas or specific topics in detail. There are a number of these particular efforts. Today, we're going to highlight 5 items particularly relevant to the Regional Growth Committee. We will first hear briefly about updates on all 5 of these, and then we'll welcome some questions after they've been presented. We'll start with then the Regional Roadway Grid Study. Julie?
Hey,
Yeah, great.
Julie, just before you jump in, I just want to acknowledge that over the course of the meeting, we've had a few of our other folks join us, including Mayor, our chair, Mayor Ramsey, Mayor Harris from Bountiful, Ari Bruning from Envision Utah. I just wanted to note that they've been on for a while, but thanks for joining. Julie?
Okay, great. Yeah, so we talked earlier a little bit about the regional transportation plan, our long-term vision for the region's mobility. And while we do a lot of exploration within the process of the RTP, sometimes we need to take a deeper dive through independent studies. And today we're going to share with you some of those ongoing studies. I guess next slide, Jordan. So mobility in Utah, right, we all know this was founded on the Plat of Zion. It's our original grid network. And we still see its influence today in many of our urban areas throughout the state. But over the last several decades, a lot of our urban development has gone in a little different direction with much less connectivity. And this has had some unintended consequences for our regional mobility. Next slide. Some of those consequences are listed here, but can be summarized basically that lower connectivity can lead to increased congestion and more difficulty for people who want to walk or bike or take transit to get to their destinations. Next slide. So there's a new study called the Utah MPO Regional Roadway Grid Study. It's a long name. You can just call it the Grid Study, which has been funded by the state legislature and is being led by the 4 MPOs, Cash, Dixie, MPOs, MAG, and then us, WFRC, with UDOT and UTA. And the purpose of this study is to identify opportunities to improve each of our region's roadway network. And this also includes, even though it's called the Roadway Grid Study, we are looking also at transit and active transportation connections. The study will explore roadway, the study will also explore roadway ownership and the process for how that's determined and changed, also known as jurisdictional transfers. So I'll just note that this study isn't starting from scratch, but it's building on previous efforts. You may remember the WFRC Street Connectivity Guide. We've been presenting on this at numerous conferences throughout the years. And so this study, it kicked off a few months ago. It's planned to be completed within the next year. And we've been coordinating with and will continue to engage with your planners and engineers throughout this process. So this is the first study. And the findings from this study in terms of those connections will be integrated within the RTP planning process. So the next study is the Power District Transportation Study. So most of you, I think, have probably heard about the Power District. It's about 100 acres near the Utah State Fair Park, the Jordan River, and downtown Salt Lake, and is the slated site in case we get a Major League Baseball team. That would be where the baseball stadium would be. So this study is also funded by the legislature and is primarily a technical analysis that will inform decision-making related to transportation needs within the Power District and its surrounding area. So you can see that study area map on the right side. I think I've all turned around. Okay, but next slide. So this study is a joint effort between us, Salt Lake City, UDOT, UTA, including the Utah Fair Park and Larry H. Miller Real Estate, who's developing that power district. And so we're anticipating that this study provides us detailed recommendations for all modes of transportation, whether that's locally owned roads, regional roadways, public transportation, active transportation, new trail connections. We're also looking at how to manage transportation around those events, whether they're the baseball games that may be there, Fair Park, and then especially on the days when there's an event both at the baseball stadium and the Fair Park. And then finally, this would provide us an implementation strategy so that we know who's implementing each recommendation, how much that cost, funding opportunities, and then the trigger points in development that would, I guess, trigger the need for those recommendations, so the timing. And so we kicked off, next slide, Jordan. We kicked off this Power District study in July. We are through the understand existing conditions, and we're anticipating that this study is completed by the end of June. And so if you're interested in either more information about either one of these studies, or if you want to be engaged more, just let myself know. And those are these two studies. Are we taking questions at the beginning, like now, or at the end?
We can do it at the end. Go ahead.
Okay. So then, yeah, the next slide is Lauren's.
Can I do Mayor, a quick interjection or point of emphasis from Julie's on the power district? Power district, that's a center. And I think one of the interesting things is all the partners have agreed that our main priority is to create a place that really works well and is a fantastic place for existing and new residents. And then secondarily is the mobility side. So we're putting quality of place even as a priority above mobility, which I think is notable. Lauren?
Thanks. Lauren Victor, long-range transportation planner for the Wasatch Front Regional Council.
And Lauren, just if those of you are keeping track, we've got 5 studies that we're highlighting here, like in rapid fire, and this is 3 of 5, Transit Fresh Look. So the first was Regional Roadway Grid Study. The Power District was second. Now we're on to Transit Fresh Look. Number 3. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yes. So I'm one of the project managers along with Ted. And this Transit Fresh Look is really taking a look at priority corridors identified by the cities. And it's a joint partnership between our transportation partners, UDOT, UTA, and MAG, along with our cities. So we have West Jordan, South Jordan, Harriman, Bluffdale, Riverton in Salt Lake County. And then we have Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, and Eagle Mountain in Utah County. So this effort is, as I mentioned, we're exploring options not previously considered. And we're really, the big emphasis that we have on this is we're taking kind of a problem solving, what would it take approach. So we're having all of the cities, they've identified their priority corridors. And we're using different metrics that we haven't used in the past to really take a look at what's it going to take to implement these corridors. This project's also seeking to align partners to a shared vision. So we want to take a new look at the future of transit, and it's warranted in this region. So there's things like the new front runner station at the point of the mountain development, and there's a lot of increased growth and projected growth in these areas. It's also going to focus on regional transit connections. So we're looking at major transit modes of light rail and bus rapid transit, not to forget about other modes that support those regional connections. So then looking at the project goals, we have 4 project goals that are leading this study. And these project goals were developed and are by our partnership committee and our technical advisory committees. So we met with each community prior to the kickoff of this study to kind of talk about what are their transit needs, what are their mobility needs in and around their cities and throughout the region. We also got feedback on these in the project kickoff meetings and an online survey. So the first one is connectivity. So we're looking at the ease of connecting to transit. And then we're looking at mobility and accessibility. So the ease of accessing opportunities. And we're also looking at economic development and transit supportive land uses. And then the last goal is really important. We want an implementable plan. This area has been studied quite a bit. And things have changed here or there. So we really want to make sure that once we finish this plan, it's the last one of its type for a good long while. So the plan's going to include opportunities for funding and actionable strategies for each partner. And then so just looking at the project schedule, we had 2 kickoff meetings in April, and we've met with our partnership committee in July and September, where we've really identified those priority corridors to find transit solutions for. And we've further refined that in September. And then we're going to continue to refine that in December. And so we have a project end of this schedule in this upcoming December because we wanted to keep the momentum going with this effort, but we are committed to continuing on into early 2025 to ensure that all of the partners and stakeholders are comfortable with the implementable plan and the shared vision that we create. We've also met with the city councils. We've had different touch points with local government check-ins. We've met and presented to each city council. Yeah, Ted, did you? Oh. But yeah, so that's kind of the project schedule and a little overview. There's obviously a lot more detail that I can share at another point or share with you if you have any questions. But Ted, do you want to add anything else?
I'll just note that we're learning from this process. The what would it take kind of approach is new for us. And it's something that we're looking at. Does it have applicability for our broader regional transportation plan, Wasatch Choice update as well?
Okay, Lauren, thank you very much. Carlton, I suspect you have a comment, and Beth, this deals with transportation. Any comments on this?
Yeah, one comment on this and then one comment back on the grid study. And the comment here is, and I think is probably a little bit to Ted's point, and that is that sometimes as we look at aspirational aspects of it, we've parked those ideas because they haven't fit into a financial constraint model when we've done the regional transportation plan. But it doesn't help set the vision about where that community really wants to go. And so figuring out some way to realistically integrate those ideas and say, you know, we're going to work toward this as part of our longer range planning, I think could be very helpful. The second part to it is that one thing that we've found is we're looking at this, our implementation of more use, more local service in April of 25 is that the lack of decent arterial streets has constrained our local bus service because we don't have room to actually maneuver the bus, even though there's high density there. And, you know, you don't want a wide freeway through there necessarily, but, you know, as communities have left, you know, the natural grid system, they've also left really a lacking for good arterial streets that are thoughtfully integrated into those areas. And so it does have an effect, and we've had to make some value choices as part of that. And I think as you're looking at those opportunities, that'd be something to keep in mind.
Beth, comment?
Well, I think Carlton articulated it really well. I think that as we're trying to figure out strategies to increase the connectivity, some of the things that we are doing we're trying to overlay them in a way that's going to make sense longer term. And so I think if we are talking about specifically, if you talk about the power district, for instance, and how that is going to integrate, what we are doing with our tracks modernization plan also has impacts, even though that's not technically the same discussion, right? It's not the same location. But again, that connectivity piece is a real critical component to that. So thank you.
Good comments. Lauren, thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Housing capacity infrastructure and marketing analysis. Number 4, Brian.
All right, thanks for giving me a bit of time on the agenda today. I want to talk about the housing capacity infrastructure.
Ryan, will you reintroduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I will. Ryan Beck with Envision Utah, here to talk about the housing capacity infrastructure and market analysis project that not only is Envision Utah doing and RCL Co doing, who are real estate experts, but we are doing this for the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. So really excited about this project. You know, in short, we know we need housing. We know we need housing, and where does it make sense to put this housing and to build this housing? So I'd like to say all the players are here, maybe more formal, all the partners are here. But you can see on this list, Wasatch Front, MAG, you know, we have the governor's office represented here. But so lots of great input, lots of the experts that'll help us out along this way. But you know, this project really seeks to understand the constraints and existing policies to help shape growth. You know, when I think about this, I don't think there's a single person in this room who this housing crisis, let's say, hasn't affected. From a personal perspective, it's affecting my family. I have a 26-year-old, I have a 27-year-old. One lives in a studio, one lives in a basement apartment. They want to start the next chapter of their life. But the housing is the constraint for them. So that's what we're looking at. I think I don't need to belabor these slides. I think everyone in this room knows we have a very unaffordable housing market that has changed in the last 20 years, but really in the last 10 years, it has just skyrocketed, putting housing out of reach for many. That's because we don't have enough units. We have more households than housing units. So there's a gap, and that's what this project intends to look at. How do we fill that gap? Where does it make sense to put housing? I'm not just talking about greenfield. I'm talking about infill, redevelopment, TOD. But as far as the process, you can see this on the screen. We need to wrap up about by end of August of 2025. So we've already got started. We've already kicked off with some stakeholder meetings. And I can see Bert over here. He has been very helpful, helping us gather constraints, land use constraints. Think wetlands, think public lands, think steep slope, things like that. So we're underway. Phase 2 is we're gonna pull RCLCO in to help with the market demand analysis, and we'll put together in phase 3 a few scenarios that we can look at, so we can look at some alternate futures and how Utah might grow and develop. But really, by the end of August, we need to have a final report that's easily digestible, so that we can understand this. I'm not going to go into into submarkets and all the detail because we're time limited here. But generally, this is the areas we'll be studying here. So you can see on the Wasatch Front, it looks like it follows where there's population or population density, and then of course spillover areas where that might occur. And then further south, we're looking at Iron County and Washington County because those areas are growing as well. And this is a statewide effort. So with that, I guess we're going to take questions at the end. So.
Yeah, we'll take them at the end, but thank you. Looking forward to that study. One more study. This one is the, Jay, you're going to talk this one. This is really interesting.
Yes. So hi, I'm Jay Musqueda. I am on the long range planning team, and I'm our advanced air mobility point person here at WFRC. Just curious, how many of you know and have heard of advanced air mobility? Because it is something new. All right, that's what I assumed. It was mostly everyone. So right now, currently, it's a way that we can use unmanned drones that fly, and they can deliver small packages. Currently in Utah, we have 2 areas where this is being done down in the southern part of Salt Lake County, and they're doing small package delivery, so about 4 pounds, using 2 different companies. There are a lot of benefits to advanced air mobility, and it goes beyond just package delivery from Walmart or other different various brands, but it also goes into using healthcare, and that these drones can deliver medicine to rural areas and with different types of providers and easily get medicine to people. So there's a lot of different benefits, and because of these reasons, the state of Utah wants to be at the forefront of this. Go to the next slide. That's okay. So in May of this year, the governor's office basically wanted Utah to become at the forefront of it. So in coordination with UDOT and 47G, which is a coalition of airspace companies and defense entities, and the Utah Inland Port, they launched a project called Project Alta. Project Alta is the Air Logistics and Transportation Alliance. It's a collaborative partnership to establish AAM in the state of Utah. And there's also multiple different studies going on right now that are being conducted by NASA. And so we have been in coordination with them, and these studies are basically figuring out how we work with communities, and then how drone companies will also work with communities, and kind of easing the fear of it, and making more public knowledge known, so that people, in particular stakeholders, can understand the benefits, and then not worry so much about noise complaints and those types of things, and also how vertiport planning works. So there's a part of that is there's a big economic impact. By 2040, it's supposed to be a $1.5 trillion industry. And right now there is more than 8, but primarily there's 8 different manufacturing and operating companies inside the state of Utah. So we have Zipline, Hexcel, Electric Power Systems, Albany Engineered Composites, Intergalactic, and there's a few more. But like I said, it is bringing a lot of different jobs. And so it's quite large to our area. And these different companies develop not just for drones, but they develop items for NASA and items for Hill Air Force Base as well. And so the future of AAM in our state is very interesting. Right now, we don't have really any vertiports that are thought of in the modern sense of a place where you would go and you would get into a drone and travel. But over the next 10 years, by about 2032, they're looking at going from small package delivery, which is 4 pounds, to medium to large, so 7 to 25 pounds, and eventually much larger, like shipping container size, and then moving people. And so we'll go to about 10 vertiports by the time the Olympics comes. And then let's say around 2050, there might be anywhere between 25 and 40 different vertiports, and that'll be across the state. And none of these in the Wasatch Front region area, none of these flights will take more than 20 minutes. So it is a pretty huge difference in transportation mode. But I'm sure there's a lot of questions with that. If anyone would like to contact me, I would love to have a chat with you, and you can reach me at jay@wfrc.org. So, yeah. Thank you.
Jay. That's great. You've seen a lot of projects. Any comments or questions relative to what we've been presented? I guess my only comment I can offer, this is exciting. There isn't anything that we have heard in these projects that doesn't impact all of us. And when they come to fruition, when you actually get some really great data and you start talking about how we can use this for our planning, man, I'll tell you, get it to us. If you haven't get it early, get it out early. Because these kinds of things we're facing every day. And I'm really excited about the air mobility piece, because if I remember hearing the conversation that was taking place by the governor, he's serious about by the Olympics, he would like to see this kind of system in play. And whether we're transportation packages and or people, that's pretty aggressive over the next 10 years. And so I see some real great things happening here.
That is correct. And the goal is to work through the larger cargo delivery in the next few years, like 5 years. And then by that 2032 mark, having the people movers be able to be used. Because right now they're just a little bit expensive, and they're still figuring out how all the battery systems work and the vertiport planning itself. But yes, the idea is by the Olympics, you could go from a vertiport to various destinations across the Wasatch Front.
Yeah, very exciting. Comments or questions?
Mayor, I'll take a minute to just note, you might be asking, why did we pick these 5? There's a lot more studies that we're involved in, and we wanted to give you ones that they're a little bit new. They're kind of unusual for us, and we're learning a lot about them, not just as things that we might pull specific ideas for incorporation into the RTP and Wasatch Choice, but also that we're learning about how you do planning in a general way. So the regional roadway grid study, all these partners taking a new look at what's the benefits, the way to do it, of connecting roads. The Power District mentioned that idea of quality of place, even prioritized above mobility. That's just unusual to do it that way. The third one, the Transit Fresh Look, Trustee Christensen really elaborated on this effectively, this idea of figuring out how do we achieve something that we have to stretch in order to make that implementation happen? How do you build that into a planning process? And I'm sorry, I'm ticking through this, and maybe this is totally unhelpful, but I wanted to give you that why of it. The housing capacity infrastructure market analysis, this forecasting of future growth is something that we do routinely. And this gives us this drill down and application of experts on new questions or more detail than we can't normally get at. And I'll especially note the market. Where does the market want to go? And a lot more detail on that side of things that can, I think, hopefully help us do a better job of forecasting. And then advanced air mobility as an example of trying to wrap our heads around how do we understand changes in technology. So I wanted to give you that sense of the why of the 5.
Yeah, great comments, Ted. Thank you. Okay, let's move to any other business. Okay, let me just refer, if I can, we do have the Wasatch Regional Council meeting that will take place on Thursday, October 24th. Normally that's a week from now, but it's actually 2 weeks from now, so if you plan for that, please remember the workshops. We're all engaged in the workshops. They've been scheduled. Please, if it's in your region, attend that. I think there's some interesting things that's unfolding in those workshops this time that's going to be very powerful in terms of bringing the communities together. We're excited about that. The next meeting for the Regional Growth Committee will take place on the 16th of January in 2025. Thanks for being with us. Do I have a motion then to adjourn? I like that. Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? Don't be shy. Do I have a second motion to adjourn? Thank you. Perfect. Okay, we got a first and a second. All in favor of adjournment, say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.